make a slight change to the batting order. I understand we've got Ken Lewis Limited, Sarah Watson, and Tim Keith. Good morning. It's still morning, isn't it? Yes, good morning. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. No, we will hand those around.
It just seems to me that there's a problem with this one.
The internet.
Only let's work.
Oh, sorry, there's two parts. Is that right?
Yeah, so just a copy of the master plan, that's already provided with the pages, summary of my statement.
Okay, so you've delivered some materials for us to consider. We've got summary of evidence from yourself, Ms. Wilson, and we've got some plans to look at.
Yeah.
That's what you want us to consider. Okay, we'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, hello everyone. My name is Sarah Robson, and I am a principal planner here in Auckland. My full qualifications and experience was set out in my primary evidence, dated 8th of June 2015. Just to recap, I confirm I comply with the current reports witness code of conduct, meaning that my primary and public evidence have been pre-circulated. Today I'll just summarise the key areas where there's an agreement and the main differences between the Section 42A report and the pre-circulated evidence prepared on behalf of Ken Lewis Limited. Just as a summary, that submission seeks to rezone the site at Donald Road, Drive in Kaitaia from rural residential to general residential. So in terms of the areas of agreement with the Section 42A report, in regards to stormwater infrastructure and transport, the Section 42A report summarised the findings of peer reviews undertaken on those aspects, prepared on behalf of Ken Lewis Limited. And the report concluded that transport effects of the proposed rezoning can be managed at the subdivision stage, and that the submitted request was generally supported. That 3 water servicing for the site was feasible in the medium term, subject to planned upgrades, and that stormwater management is feasible with on-site solutions available. So those points confirm that the site is technically suitable for the scale and density of residential development, which would be enabled by the proposed rezoning to premium residential. It is further noted that Appendix 1 of the Section 42A report generally agrees with my assessment that the proposal aligns with the zone outcomes and relevant part of the documents. Now I see there's 3 key differences in terms of what the Section 42A report has stated and here. So from an economic perspective, I've got my colleague here, Tim, who will speak to that, but I'll just provide a small recap of our views. The Section 42A report relies heavily on the economic review, which suggested that only 18% of the site needed to be rezoned. Tim has provided rebuttal evidence that this conclusion underestimates Kaitaia's long-term residential demand and fails to account for the potential and realistic capacity constraints of limited land elsewhere in Kaitaia. With regards to natural hazards and resilience, the Section 42A report has not given sufficient consideration of the significant flood risk across much of the currently zoned residential or general residential land in Kaitaia. The subject site is not affected by flooding and is strategically located to provide more resilient housing capacity, essentially taking pressure off flood affected areas to provide for the future growth of Kaitaia and providing opportunity for management if that's something that's wanting to be done in the future. The urban form and growth management. Retaining the rural residential zoning allows for lifestyle blocks of around 3,000 to 4,000 square metres, which in my mind creates potential for fragmenting of land in a logical location that may be needed for future growth. This outcome, in my mind, compromises integrated stormwater design, roading, infrastructure servicing, and public open space opportunities. In contrast, I believe that a general residential zoning enables a master planned approach, as I've highlighted in my plan there, where we could all integrate walkways, cycle lanes, green corridors, and even include that ecological of us. The proposed rezoning enables a comprehensive development approach that is unlikely to be realised with the current rural residential zoning. It was acknowledged in the Section 42A report that there could be a potential for an amended proposal, potentially looking at something with a split zoning like that. While I feel that the full rezoning of the site remains the most appropriate outcome, I acknowledge that there could be an opportunity for refinement or a partial rezoning. However, the reason we prepared that master plan was to demonstrate that the topography of the site is quite challenging in locations where we've got streams and overland flow paths. And that master plan identifies developable areas and constrained areas. I think in my primary evidence, I've made a comment that realistically only 50% of the site would be used for residential land, given the constraints in topography, just because the costs of potentially doing the earthworks things like that would be challenging. So in our mind, we see it's quite constrained through the centre, but there's quite a bit of space that could be flat and be usable. So from that perspective, we felt that rezoning of the full site made sense. And hence that's why we prepared the master plan. So in our opinion, it shows how a comprehensive development could be achieved, reflecting those characteristics. So therefore, any rezoning must respond to those topographic realities, not simply apply a percentage. And the Section 42A recommendation, in my mind, does not address the specific characteristics or natural features of the site. So in conclusion, the subject site is a logical and resilient location for Kaitaia's growth, directly adjoining existing residential areas, and it's unaffected by significant hazards. The general residential zoning better achieves the objectives of the proposed plan, the NPS on urban development, and the purpose of the RMA. So therefore, that rezoning, whether it is in whole or in part, is the most appropriate outcome to ensure Kaitaia can accommodate safe, efficient, and well-designed.
Thank you very much. It's quite a big summary, so thanks very much. We have read all the evidence.
Yes.
I'm just thinking we might hear from Mr. Heath before we sort of launch into questions, because I suspect questions we might want to defer to him on some, and he might want to defer to you on others. So perhaps we'll hear your summary, Mr. Heath, and then we'll have some questions after that.
No problem at all. My name is Timothy Heath. I'm a director in established property economics. Moved 2.5 decades ago now. I've submitted a background report in economics, and my rebuttal just sort of summarise my position on that. My economic assessment really points out the need for this land to be rezoned to provide long-term certainty for the market. Kaitaia is in an unusual situation. While they may have existing capacity or future capacity within the existing urban forms, the new floodplain maps has really taken a lot of that capacity out. So there is actually no real meaningful capacity for intensification or even expansion of Kaitaia urban area itself. This is the logical next location and next step for Kaitaia growth outside the floodplains. And it provides, from an economic perspective, an efficient location, gives us pretty much a plug-in, all the infrastructure can be dealt with, as agreed in section 2A report, and it provides seamless integration, good accessibility, etc. And we touched on earlier on that the requirement for the site to be rezoned is actually an important consideration from an economic perspective. There is a large proportion of the land that would be undevelopable. So the developable part of the land is better utilised and in a more efficient manner. So currently under the PDP, it's proposed to be urbanised in a rural lifestyle form. That's not the most efficient form, and it could take that land out of the game for future urbanisation, more intensive urbanisation, whereas the ability to provide additional housing with the developable parts of the site means that the homes can be delivered at a more cost-effective price point into the market than otherwise sort of a limited or reduced number of homes enabled. So there is some economic rationale behind it, the extent of the zone. And while it may seem more than what's required today or the foreseeable future, 2.5 decades of working with projections, what I can tell you, that projections will be wrong. They are a guide to a direction, but don't get hung up on the exact number because they change literally every 6 months. So there's clearly a significant push in the future for the northern economy. Going to be significantly improved access to the region. All this is going to open up opportunities, and why I say that is I've seen the exact same thing happen, for example, in Cambridge with the Waikato Expressway opening up growth that's running 2.5 times what was predicted for Cambridge. So the opportunities for Northland, and which will then flow on into Kaitaia and other areas north and south, will be greater than what the current projections, I think, point towards. And if land can be provided to provide certainty for the market and certainty for planning, infrastructure planning, at no or very minimal cost to the community, I think that's a win-win. Most plan changes on urban fringe areas come at some cost to the public sector, public community. So increases the marginal cost. But in this instance, I think a lot of that's internalised from the development itself. So I think that's it's additional supply, additional competition, providing a more diverse range of topologies, etc., in an efficient manner, which I think provides long-term certainty, and I think that certainty could go beyond the 30 years.
Sorry.
That provides that certainty beyond the 30-year period, which I think is a positive rather than negative. So yeah, from an economic perspective, I think there's a lot of economic benefits that can be provided by the rezoning. Technically, it's going to be rezoned to rural. That's not the most efficient urban rezoning. Residential zone will certainly enable more efficient development of that land. So on that basis, I think there's significant economic benefits and no consequential costs. It's a good outcome and a positive outcome for the plan and the community.
Okay, thank you. I'll probably possibly start with your evidence. Obviously, you disagree with Mr. McElrath's assessment about where the demand comes from, but it seems to me that it's based primarily on the demand that, or the supply, or plan-enabled supply he refers to, you don't believe can be realised because of the recent flooding maps.
That's correct.
That's it in essence, right?
And he's identified the commercial feasibility is significantly lower than the future demand over the medium to long term. So even that intensification is not commercially feasible within his analysis. So additional supply needs to be provided somewhere else.
So I mean that would need council to acknowledge that a lot of its residential zoning in Kaitaia is potentially fatally flawed, at least subject to high levels of flooding risk.
Correct. So any mitigation of that flood risk is going to add additional cost to development in that area, which pushes up price points, etc. So while it may not be an absolutely dead duck in terms of future residential capacity or development within Kaitaia, there's constraints now and overlay in place that increases the cost of development in that and increases the long-term risk.
I mean, maybe I missed it, but I didn't see a lot of analysis about the land you think is flawed and how flawed it is. Is it? But I think your evidence is it might be developable, but that will cost extra cost in an area that's already facing cost constraints with regards to. Is that
well, even market economics research shows there's very limited commercially feasible development within the existing urban form. So then on top of that, you've got the flood mapping mitigation, which wasn't factored in. If you factor that in, I'd probably say it would be minimal to very possibly none commercially feasible capacity within the existing form.
And again, you're not a hazards expert, but I understand Kaitaia has a number of hard protection structures that apply to the whole catchment, particularly around the rivers and stuff. So one would think that would be the immediate, first look at enabling that residential land to be developed, looking at that catchment-wide mitigation. But any evidence on the feasibility of that?
I haven't done any evidence on the mitigation costs to flooding or close on flooding vehicles to the community.
Yes, but Mr. McElrath's primary concern is I sort of get that he sees a case for some zoning, just not the extent that you close. I think, Mr. Robson, you're indicating that there potentially could be some middle ground there, and I just want to explore it. I mean, it's not that we're trying to push you in that direction at this point, but we certainly want to explore it and see what council officers have to say about it. The obvious response would be to look at the land along Pop Road. Unfortunately, the council maps failed on us, and I can't get it on stuck with Google Earth. So Donald's right. So I'll get by. Donald Road, and the southern side of Donald Road seems an obvious place to look.
Yes.
And then potentially running down Allenbell Drive could be somewhere where you could meet in the middle. Because so just have a think about that. Because I've got some questions about the master plan too.
Yes.
Which is not that one. It's in the evidence. Yeah, that one. There we go. Yeah, the planning. It seems to me that the bespoke design also acknowledges that you've got rivers and streams to deal with, even though you're not the 1 in 100 year flood, and that you're going to have your own catchment management issues, and that there are going to be sort of quite wide floodway areas that we're not going to be able to develop.
Probably can't really comment on that extent. I mean, we've provided our stormwater report, which has identified that it's providing that ecological system, but also providing the stormwater management and treatment, so that we're managing our stormwater before it goes anywhere else downstream.
Really, the question I'm asking you is that this master plan preserves that these green areas are therefore riparian flood.
Yes.
Right. So what you and it's the connectivity between your urban areas that I really want to ask some questions about.
Right.
So what you've done is you've shown a link between this group of development that's going to be around Allenbell Drive and then this area that's on probably eastern boundary. Is that going to be a bridge?
No. So the overland flow paths are shown with the blue line. So the only real stream component is down at the very lowest part of the site. So at the moment, it's quite an elevated site, so it rises very quickly, and is quite quite deep in size overland flow paths, but they're very, very narrow.
So there's no connectivity between these other areas. I mean, is that obviously is intentional? Is that because you would need bridges to get
Yeah, in
there?
terms of roading, yes. Yes.
And for an urban, I know you're not an urban designer, but the obvious urban design question that I'm not a designer either, but the obvious urban design response I would think would be, for those residential areas to function, wouldn't they need to be connected?
There is every opportunity to look at that. I guess in our mind, as we were working through this, we wanted to maintain the landform as much as possible to ensure that that overland flow path isn't altered by potential design. And I guess that was the key driver of preparing our master plan, was to identify the natural features, retain them as much as possible, and utilise the more opportune space. So there's every opportunity for that to be an option, and obviously roading connectivity would be looked at as part of a resource consent process. We did have some early discussions with Council's transport planner, his name escapes me at the moment, and he indicated at the beginning that he thought a loop road around the top was also what he would have thought to be a logical pathway to.
Yes. Okay. And in terms of this, so has there been any analysis done of how many sites since the on a 100-year river flooding mapping from NRC has arrived? Has there been? Can you give us some numbers as to how many properties that are currently zoned general residential will have significant issues? Have you got some numbers of?
I don't have any numbers on me now, but I'd be happy to provide some.
You've got X number of lost plan enabled capacity, and then therefore it needs to be offset by this new plan enabled capacity. Unless I've missed it.
No,
Seems that
I
the evidence
don't
is going to say
believe we've got
all
that.
these sites over here flood.
Yeah.
And so you need to rezone this here because it doesn't. But whilst I accept that principle in a general sense, we would probably need some numbers to back that up. So that you're talking about, well, X capacity numbers here is constrained or lost. But I suspect there would be some sites that possibly couldn't develop, and there'd be the other sites that you would just need to invest more. Seeing that we're missing those numbers.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't have those numbers, but I'm more than happy to go away and get that prepared, and we can provide it as support.
Okay, well, I think we'd be assisted by that. Yeah, and in the meantime, if we were to prefer Mr. McElrath's evidence, have you considered a more refined zoning option?
Yeah. It's like, oh no, you can't do that. And I thought, no, you can. I've done it like that all morning. Yeah. But for some reason, yeah. I'll just put us on mute. Everyone comes back in.
Right, yeah, can somebody tell me where we were? I'm asking questions about the master plan, and then I think I've got a question to you. Have you considered, if we accepted Mr. McElroy's economic services, have you considered an alternative zoning arrangement that, you know, that we and council officers could consider, or is that something that's yet to be done?
We've given very high level thought to it at this stage. It's more something open to and happy to discuss, and I think that there is some logic, particularly with the access points up onto Donald Road. So in terms of the topography and the natural features, down towards Elmdale Drive with the two there's an access point and a service drain onto Elmdale Drive. The topography.
Elmdale Drive, yeah, okay, yes, I see that point, yes, okay, thank you.
Those two connection points are a bit more challenging in terms of the natural topography and they're the sort of the wetter areas with the streams channels as opposed to overland flow paths. So I would suggest that if you were looking at a partial rezoning, you would probably look at that strip that adjoins the residential area up on towards Donald Road. That area is a lot more accessible in terms of topography, and you can connect up around to the top there. At the moment, there's a bit of a dirt track / road that's up to the water reservoir that's up to the top of the north there. That's the little white box there. So at the moment, it's currently used with a reasonably good access point there.
Okay, thanks. Okay, well, I think I'll probably ask all my share of questions, so I'll give the other panelists some opportunity now.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it screams out that it really needs a staged approach. Perhaps what you're looking at is more than is necessary or more than manageable at the moment. And the last thing we really want to end up is with the swathe of zoned land but undeveloped and lying idle as such. And I think you'd be closer to the economic analysis by McElroy and also with the physical constraints of the site to maybe look at it in a staged approach. So when you say that diagram, if you call that a master plan, it's a little bit short of being a master plan, I think. It needs to really perhaps show a staged approach to how you might look at it, and you might actually back the zoning of that initial area and almost the deferred zoning over the other that can get brought on. I mean, the economic evidence, I don't see any difficulty with the economic evidence. It's good, and it's certainly illustrates what you see when you go to Kaitaia, puts an analysis around there, but it just seems to be, it needs a staged approach, and that way it's more manageable. It's more manageable from council's point of view too, in relation to infrastructure servicing. It's the whole concept of master planning is there basically, but it just needs to go a bit further.
Okay.
Some infrastructure questions.
Yeah, I'll ask some infrastructure. I think I want to talk to Mr. Heath initially. You talked about the NRC overlay flooding maps and the impact of flooding on existing residential areas. Have you looked at the impact of flooding, that site flooding existing infrastructure? There's a lot of our pipe work goes through those floodplains.
That's probably the wrong expert to speak on that. My understanding is that it be assessed as part of the infrastructure work that's gone on. Develop the plans before you at the moment.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll be specific about the infrastructure then. I think you're talking about Lake Greg and Bonnets, which are the southwest side of the if we talk about transport, Donald Road Bridge, single lanes, that's one problem. Allen Bell, Matthews Avenue intersection, you do something there, just the additional loading. I'm just thinking of what the ratepayer might have to carry unless the developer wants to carry all these costs. Water supply, it talks our planners report under paragraph 70 in the table there. So that water supply, distribution bottlenecks because of change in pipe sizes, upgrade is needed to support full rezoning yield, and obviously there's modelling needed. Wastewater looks good from your site because gravity feed into existing systems, and then you read on overloaded gravity mains, particularly along North Road, and there's a 450 millimetre pipe trunk out to the wastewater plant that's already overloaded. Stormwater, that works great. The question I have is, the moment you increase the impermeable surfaces with your roading and roof sizes, that will discharge down into Ellenville Drive before it gets into the Awanui, which is stock banked. So have you considered what that increased discharge flow might do to the stormwater flows? They'll back up stormwater pipes and flood Ellenville and Egypt. Any thought to any of that?
Yes, yeah. So obviously I'm not a stormwater expert, but having reviewed these.
Just a boy that's been outside for a long time.
So just having reviewed our stormwater management plan is by Robin Ryan. So what she was demonstrating with that assessment is that you can manage the stormwater on site and discharge it slowly so that you're having a net zero impact on the downstream environment. So
Detention.
So you can also use some retention, but essentially given that we're going to have a lot of green space on the site because of the topography and the low-lying parts of it, there is suitable positions within the site that can be used for wetlands that would provide stormwater treatment and retention, detention, depending on what is actually proposed, but we can demonstrate that it is achievable to avoid adverse effects downstream.
Yeah, okay. No, I just wanted to bring you, I know you're aware of it, but just what our planners was put in front of us as well. So there's comfort argument.
Yes, yeah, so to me, it does make sense having houses high and dry, you know, we've got all the developments that higher. This is obviously elevated as well, going up the road here. There's been recent upgrades of the waste of the sewage along Donald Road, and also on Allenbale Drive, there's a stormwater project there as well for upgrades to be done as well. So there's already been that infrastructure work put in. In terms of the staging, that was one of the questions that I was wondering as well. In the infrastructure report, on page 11, it does talk about stage development to align with planned network upgrades. And it specifically refers to the Donald Road storage and also Paki Ave, the next road overflow reduction. We've got giant pipes in the middle of the old pack and save site at the moment, still not quite in the ground just yet. Did you want to talk further about that staging, because it doesn't give any further information apart from just saying stage development to align?
Again, it's not in my evidence, so I'll just be talking through my general knowledge of doing that report. So the intent, I believe, with that wording was that from an economic perspective, to develop this piece of land, you'd have to do it at a staged approach anyway. You wouldn't be able to build it as a whole. And I imagine the intent would be to put in line with planned upgrades and developer agreements for funding, as you do in many places, is that you'd be able to build parts of it and then do the stormwater components that match. I guess, yes, the point has already been made that the master plan probably doesn't demonstrate how that could be done. So further information could be provided to further elaborate on what sort of approach we would be thinking in terms of staging. But it came down to the potential for how you fund it, build it, and then use that to build the next stage and things like that. So that to me is the intent of using the wording.
You know, that was the main question that I have. So it's very central to get a
And
central site that's not in a flood zone.
and the plan as it is really lends itself to saving, because it's got separated little blocks. And of course, the market's going to come tomorrow, or the day it's rezoned, it's going to come over a period of time. So, yeah, you're right. It lends itself to that type of role.
Yeah, I think we've heard a lot of submissions from the eastern area. We haven't had as many submissions for the northern area. And one of the feedbacks that we've had from central government in terms of investment, for example, from Climate Order, is that they don't want to build in something that potentially could flood. And so they have that precautionary approach, even with the flood mitigation there.
I do a little bit more. That is, it's a pretty sensitive topic, and they have different measures of feasibility as well. They have a different development model, because it's not just an economic outcome that they, or a financial outcome developer. They've got social outcomes to meet, they've got cultural outcomes to meet, as well as economic. So they have a different set of parameters to assess their developments, but minimising risk is a critical long-term one, because it's public money at the end of that, and they need to be accountable for it. So, yeah, that would be a concern with them. Probably a good deal breaker in terms of whether they went into the existing living area or not.
Okay, can I just have a couple more follow-up questions? And this is directed to you. I'm interested in if we were to explore, zoning along the top or southern side of the road and or the western side of the property. I'm just wondering, and this whole question about staging, I'm just wondering, what is the economic argument? What is the economic argument against the eastern part of the site remaining rural residential? I mean, it's a pretty enabling zone. And the way I look at the rural residential zone is it's the smallest lot size we can create without having to be reticulated. So it is an easier pathway to develop what is residential living in a rural zone. I'm just wanted to see what your economic argument against that, potentially as a buffer eastwards to the general rural zone, is.
To me, it really takes that land out of the equation for long-term development. To read it, because if you develop the lifestyle blocks, that's essentially what they will be. They are high value, and then to cut them up is a more problematic issue for future long-term expansion of residential. So while it may be a short-term sugar hit to get now, it's not really dealing with the long-term issue or long-term certainty. And then is this the best location for rural residential, given the long-term constraints within the existing urban area? I'd sort of question it as well.
But given the questions that have been put to you by Councillor McNally about the infrastructure constraints that you have up in Kaipapa, and obviously they're obviously going to have to focus finances also on flooding mitigation, because you've got the second largest community in the district subject to a lot of flooding. So I suspect that'll be the focus of a lot of the capital works expenditure. Does that make rural residential a slightly better prospect, given that it wouldn't add to the capacity issues of the infrastructure and the constrained spending that would have to compete with against flood mitigation?
From my perspective, yeah, to me, the only issue with rural residential in terms of infrastructure is that if the town does expand and this is land that should be intensified in the future, you're potentially creating a compromise of how that land can be developed comprehensively later on. So I'm not saying rural residential is not an appropriate zoning for the site. I just think there's a more appropriate zoning that won't contribute to potential fragmentation that results in a more infill approach where you're sort of retrofitting a lifestyle block to a more urban form that then makes it less compact and less desirable from a, infrastructure and transport perspective. I think less urban design components come into that when you're doing small infill of individual properties that are owned by different people who will not come together to do a comprehensive approach. So that, I guess, is part of the argument that we've put forward from a planning perspective, is that the zoning is appropriate as proposed, but we believe there's a more appropriate zoning that will prevent that fragmentation in the future.
The same question's been asked in Dairy Flat in Auckland, and that's been chopped up, land values have elevated, so to buy it out, to develop a comprehensive plan is just cost prohibitive now. And Auckland Transport's finding that out and trying to designate public roads up there. So it does become problematic, and then you get some that do want to develop it and some that don't want to develop it.
And I think it'd be fair to say that one of the concerns I have is that it property is disconnect. Well, I wouldn't say disconnect, but it's a long way from social service, community services, town centre. And I know that you've done your walking analysis. Yeah. And I mean, when I looked at this, 15, 20 minutes, that's really pushing the analysis. I'm just wondering how connected, if you allow the entire site to go residential, how is it really going to be connected with walking and cycling?
I think there is connectivity, potentially less to the social services, as you pointed out, definitely to the commercial and retail components. There is also public transport that is available along Allendale Drive. which I guess lends the loop road approach to connecting those 2 points, so that you've got connectivity to both roads. In the walking and cycling, there are opportunities, but I guess there is a restrictive component with the social services.
Because of the flipped nature of the evidence exchange and what have you, and the rebuttal evidence that have come through, we're often giving the council officers a chance to respond. Ms. Trinity, this is your one. Would you like to provide any further comments or any question or clarification?
At this stage, we have council experts available on Thursday, as mentioned yesterday.
Yeah.
If there's any questions relating to infrastructure, I'm also preparing rebuttal evidence from our clients.
Yeah, okay.
What do you think of the staged approach? If there were these people were to look at a staged approach and do some further work on a master plan around that. So,
Yeah, I was just going to ask a similar question.
Yeah.
Or the reduced zoning that runs closer to the existing road network. I mean, it's not your job to design their rezoning request, but if you turned your mind to it, have you got any comments you want to?
Yeah,
share?
I think that would seem like a logical solution.
What I would then, obviously, we're going to have put some questions to your experts later on. But I think what we want to do is probably keep the door open to see if it can't be, obviously you want to do some more research. That analysis of the land that is subject to flooding, and perhaps that may end up being quite a big task. I don't know whether you're going to be able to actually answer that question, because it sounds to me like you might need to throw some considerable effort at it to actually work out what the implications are of that flooding overlay on zoned areas in Kaitaia. Got any comments on that?
Your comments probably after the submit is finished on engagement moving forward.
Yeah, because I think we're really interested in this whole issue of if that land, if the existing land, general residential land is confident, we probably want to get a handle over how much and to what extent before we start rezoning to offset it, because we're not really sure what we're offsetting.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I look, our hearings process is an opportunity for submitters to put their best foot forward. And I'm very aware that we have a very full timetable before the end of the year in a very short space of time to report back to council to meet our ministerial established guidelines. So my suggestion to the panel is maybe we think about the workload or capacity that we have and the panel has to, I guess, work through submitters' issues moving forward to be able to effectively do that. We've had a long process with Minute 14 and plenty of opportunities to resolve a lot of these issues. Some are further away than others. Benefited from a further range of experts to attend today from the questions the panel's had. Just like to keep that in mind, panel to keep that in mind as we move forward through C&D particularly.
Yeah, okay, no, thanks for that question. I'm not surprised to hear that.
No, it's really that staged approach and how they, I mean, in the short term, if you follow, the advice or the comments we're getting from the officers, you can see there's a commonality in terms of how everybody sees it. And as has been said, it's over to you folk as submitters to come forward with a solution in terms of what can be done and what's manageable. And maybe part of it, rezone is residential, the wider part left as it is for the current time. Some sort of narrative in the plan or in the decisions that indicates that's sort of a longer term project. But I guess you've heard the concerns. It's, as you say, it's over to you folk now.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, okay, well, thanks very much. We've had a full and frank discussion. And you want to submit some more material.
Yes, I think we will. I'll go back and I'll talk to
And as I say,
and see if we can provide a very timely manner.
and so your submission isn't over. We're questions for some of the council officers that we will submit in relation to this property as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, great.
Mr. McPhee, it's your clients now. If you'd like to come up to the table. This is the Grey Gilrain Holdings Limited and Okura Trust. I understand both organisations are represented.
Okura Trust. I represent Grey Gilrain.
Okay, so Mr. McPhee, does your evidence relate to Okura Trust both parties or?
No, I guess some of the Grey Gilrain Holdings. For a trust with the Grey Gilrain.
Okay, well, we'll leave it over, hand it over to you.
Thank you and good morning. Just a summary of my evidence in rebuttal. So I'm taking this read, I assume. The land holdings are currently zoned for rural production. And rural residential zone is sought by the submitter. The land holdings directly adjoin rural residential zone land adjacent to the Kerikeri township. Land holdings are under 2 kilometres from Kerikeri Primary, Kerikeri High School and Town Centre, and have the potential to provide much needed development land to support growth. Land holdings are generally free from development constraints. They're not identified as being highly productive land and in close proximity to the wastewater treatment plant, providing an efficient option for delivering particular services at a time when demand requires it. In terms of the existing character of the zone, the submission area is already fragmented into 23 consented titles, which is fundamentally inconsistent with the rural production zone's anticipation of only 2 dwellings of the land holdings. The council itself, in the decision for the resource consent, RC 222025, determined the area is not strictly rural in character, comprising mainly rural residential development, and involves no loss of land with significant rural production value. The zoning request is not a speculative greenfield proposal, but a move to correct a zoning anomaly and align with planning map with the lawfully established existing character of the land holdings. In terms of the strategic justification and land suitability, the land consists of LUC Class 4 soils, which are not classified as highly productive, making it more suitable for residential use and agricultural use, particularly when considered in concert with the existing character of the land holdings established. The site is a logical and contiguous extension of Kerikeri's existing urban fringe. The Waitangi Forest provides significant permanent and highly defensible boundaries of north and east. In terms of infrastructure, the land holdings are strategically located adjacent to the Kerikeri wastewater treatment plant. The main rising sewer main runs directly through the property, offering significant future servicing efficiencies. I also note, which wasn't in my evidence, that there's an agreement with council for the land holdings, including any further subdivision of it, to connect to the sewage treatment plant, conditional on there being capacity to treat the waste at the time. I believe the Section 42 report's reliance on the Kerikeri-Waipapa Spatial Plan is misplaced, as is a non-statutory unfunded document with a scope that failed to consider the location of the new Kerikeri wastewater treatment plant. Further, in my opinion, council's applied a disproportionate evidentiary burden on the submitter, demanding a full suite of technical reports for the submission, while justifying its own 170 hectare Waipapa road rezoning of rural residential land with a single strategic sentence. I'll leave it there at this point. I might just introduce Craig Lee, who from Okura Trust. Thank you for the opportunity of being here. We've been living in this an Okura Drive or the Shepherd Drive for the last 25 years. We've bought 50 acre breakthrough orchard down here and created Okura Drive in the 2000s. Along the way, the operative plan or proposed plan were never really aligning or allowing us to do what we wanted to do. So we were continually submitting on this draft plan process. So we had to use the subdivision rules at the time, and
wasn't clear, there's no long-term financial sort of benefit to us. We had to sort of, we're trying to exist financially, so it was not a easy process. We built Okura Drive, we put power down there. We have a number of sort of residential lots down there, 4,000 square metre right size, and then we'll continue to produce a larger development that we're, which goes up to the Kerikeri-Waipapa Plant. And we've just continued to build another road up there for that. So there's a lot of infrastructure that we've put in place. Again, 2 k's from town. It's been kind of surprising to us over the last 25 years, given that the 2 k's from the Kerikeri post office and primary schools, that the proposed zone of rural production has been proposed again for the future. Not only that, the new proposed rural production land is it's a more conservative zone, it seems, in terms of the sizing. 40 hectares is a right. It seems the zone just does not suit what's there currently. I think it's what's there currently now at the moment is definitely a rural residential part. And so, you know, we are interested in the idea of having the zone sort of reflect what actually is there and take advantage of the location of this landscape for the future potential of Kerikeri. We've been talking in the past about how the boundaries were described as Okura Stream, which is like a small waterway as a defensible boundary of different zones. And so we sort of kind of go that maybe that's not a way of looking at, maybe we're more looking at what's there now, and then what could be there in the future in an easy way. Yeah, the infrastructure's there, the roading's there. We don't at the moment have any kind of way of analysing traffic flow or anything like that, except this on an anecdotal basis that we live there. We have lived there for the last 25 years. We drive in town, out of town every day. If I drive to Waipapa at 8 o'clock in the morning and see all the vehicles driving along Waipapa Road in town, all of those, there's traffic restrictions there. Whereas from our side, the south side of Kerikeri, you can come and go through town or through the south part of town quite simply. So, you know, at the moment, there's more, it's going to be more, the Tubbs lands is going to provide more congestion from that. So it's kind of the logic of that doesn't really make any sense to us. The sewage pipe running through our particular property at the moment, the Okura Trust property. There's a large rising main there. We were provided with an agreement with the council as a settlement for this Public Works Act. It was a requirement to take land from us for access through to the sewage plant block of land. That block of land didn't have any road access, so the access rate. So this is where the infrastructure currently exists: high voltage power, underground high voltage power, the large underground rising main. We also have an agreement with the council for further capacity allows for the land around us do have access to the sewage line if capacity allows. And we've negotiated an access way. We had a T connection installed at the bottom of the hill on the flats, this rising main, and for that sewage potential. During the process of the road being constructed, the engineers have made me aware that that would never work. You need to have some serious infrastructure to manage on-site sewage collection and inject it into this rising main. You know, the communication between the pumps would be massive. So we renegotiated the process where the pipe spills into a manhole as it gravity feeds down to the plant, and we've negotiated an easement over that strip of land for the benefit of that potential. Yeah, it just seems to be very seems very strange that this person's come in and say that they can't see how this increased intensity of this landscape. It just seems to be completely logical. Yeah. Anyway, so we're happy to be here, have a chat, and we appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. Have you got more evidence to present, Mr.?
No, it's all in my evidence and rebuttal.
Okay, right. Got a few questions. I take the general sort of theme of your evidence is that the rural residential zone should be looked at almost as an offset, as an urban zone to provide for urban growth, in the sense that you've got concerns about intensification in Kerikeri and the ability to achieve that in the rural residential forms that function. Is that?
No, I think a rural residential zone is appropriate at this juncture. It abuts rural residential zone. The point I made with reference to the location of the Kerikeri wastewater treatment plant is that if at some point a rural residential zone is to be grown to an urban capacity, then the location of the treatment plant makes it a very efficient option, cost-effective option, should council wish to go down that track.
Okay, well, if we go to paragraph 14 then, I think it's your primary statement. I'll read it to you. Outside of the residential and mixed use zones within urban areas, the rural residential zone is another way in which council is able to provide sufficient development capacity for housing to meet projected growth demand.
Correct.
Yeah, so in that sense, you're seeing the rural residential zone as a companion to achieve urban growth.
Oh, a companion for sure. I mean, the general residential zone is a more intense way to provide for housing.
Yes.
The rural residential zone is also another way of providing for housing to satisfy growth.
So in sense, it's your evidence that the rural residential zone is like an urban zone. It provides for opportunities for urban growth, because you said it's sufficient development capacity.
For housing.
Yeah, for housing. Yeah. I'm just trying to put the context of this in place, because the rural residential zone also has another function, which is to provide opportunities to subdivide in the rural environment, given that the general rural zone is now quite constrained in terms of development opportunities. The way I understand council's rural strategy is that the rural residential, rural production zone has been having lot size lifted to 40 hectares. And then, but they have provided other opportunities in the other rural zones, including the settlement zone, rural residential lifestyle, to offset that loss of rural zoning opportunity. So it's performing that function. And I think what you're saying is that it also performs a function as a way to provide meeting housing demand from an urban sector.
Providing housing demand, correct. I'm hesitant to use the word urban because I don't think it's urban. It's more peri-urban, peri-rural, depending on how you want to class it. But it's certainly an opportunity to help satisfy that housing demand, particularly if there are constraints on urban infrastructure to provide housing in an urban area.
Yes, yeah, and obviously spatial strategy, and you don't think we should have any regard to it.
Oh, I don't think any regard, but certainly it's going to be a little bit careful. Like, it is a non-statutory document. It's unfunded, and it is just a plan until there's an implementation of it to realise it.
Yeah, so the spatial plan has a focus on compact urban. Should we have regard to that outcome?
You should have regard to it, certainly. Yep. What I say to that though is it also relies quite heavily on being able to service that densification in the urban zone.
Yeah. So we're concerned about being able to service it, obviously, would impact its ability to achieve the compact urban form. Is it the role of the spatial plan to provide detailed infrastructure planning and cost?
If it's going to, well, it also promotes, I think, from memory, zone changes to take away almost their development in the rural environment. Yeah. So it's certainly focused on having currently 95% of Kerikeri's growth in its urban areas.
I mean, the spatial plan does talk about the infrastructure that's needed for the growth and the intensification. It's a mix of greenfield and intensification, medium density residential zone, town centre zone. But it talks about the infrastructure that's needed. I suppose my question is it the job of the spatial plan to go all those extra steps to actually fund it and set a timeline to deliver it? The job of the spatial plan?
It talks about the implementation plan, so I'll say yes.
Yeah. Okay, but there are other processes that can provide infrastructure. You've got an infrastructure strategy and your long-term plan. Isn't that the process that takes up the spatial plan's outcomes and says, how do we deliver these? How do we structure and fund it? Wouldn't that be the next step?
The development contributions will also play a part in
But you have faith in that process to be able to deliver the outcomes of the spatial plan? And that case?
I don't have an intimate knowledge of council's ability to provide that infrastructure. I know anecdotally that Kerikeri is close to capacity and that the discharge consent is also, if not at or near to capacity. And I'm unaware of any relodging of or for any discharge consent, which is needed. I mean, you can put another tank on, as I understand it, and double the capacity of the plant, but it's discharge consent itself, which is.
So given the focus of the spatial plan is obviously to move towards a more compact urban form that's consistent with the direction of the NPSUD, and whilst Barnwell is now accepted that it's a tier 3 local authority. Yep. And so it's under that part of the NPSUD where they're not required to do stuff, but they're encouraged to do it. So in that sense, whilst it's a non-statutory document, it follows a national direction. Accept that?
I do.
Yeah. And that it's got this focus on intensification and some greenfield development. There are a lot of submitters coming to us asking for their rural land to be zoned rural residential. They all come and say, well, my site really, that's the one you should be zoning. And it's got a number of parcels in it. And this is quite a common argument. We obviously need to think cumulatively about what the impacts around all of these would be. Is that, does it then, Mr. McPhee, does it then undermine the council's focus on intensification and its with the urban areas?
No, I think the intent of what the spatial plan is trying to do in terms of intensification is to the urban. But it also is predicated that people want to come to Kerikeri to live in 3-level walk-ups, and historically consents have not demonstrated that. So I think there needs to be a viable option, one, for people who want to move here, and two, until there is a plan in place to service those urban areas, there needs to be something.
Have you got any evidence for us on the capacity? I mean, the council has zoned areas for rural residential around Kerikeri, and I think they've introduced some new areas. You referred to at least one, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you were saying, why have you zoned that rural residential and not mine? So that's part of their rural strategy, I suppose. One of the things that I think we have to take into consideration is the potential for overzoning. If you overzone rural residential zone, then that's the money will flow where it goes easiest, and then it might end up not all money might flow to the rural residential zone. I mean, you might not get any more intensification outcomes. Okay.
Well, I'm only talking to this later. So Waipapa Road, for example, is further away. They can see the details. That is rezoned for residential through the district plan. It is significantly further away than these land holdings. Tuts Farm, which Mr. Lee referred to, it is a Ringtale development at the end of Landing Road. They had a different underlying zone. I think that was coastal living, but there was the density achieved there was through resources.
Okay, thank you.
But I think, sorry, just to finish off, I think this strategically, this location of this landholding within 2 kilometres of township is a different consideration than some of those others which have been or asking to be zoned rural residential.
Okay, so your evidence is that this is a better case for rezoning than some of the other ones that councils recommend.
Correct, I mentioned, Waipapa Road.
But that doesn't sort of address the question of we end up rezoning this side, are we potentially risking providing an overcapacity of rural residential?
There may be a risk. I mean, you can have a supply, it doesn't mean you can't. So, a prime example is the land at the end of Kerikeri Road, which has been zoned residential for 30, 40 years. And has been sitting there on 4 titles for as long. 34 hectares or something in residential zone land. So, I mean, you can zone something, but you cannot make someone develop. So.
And this is a question for both of you. I mean, you made the point, Mr. McPhee, that both of that point that the land is in productive land under the NPSHPR. And I think, Mr. McPhee, you referred to it as marginal.
Wow.
And I was wondering what you meant by marginal.
For the lack of a better term, it's not highly productive.
Okay, yeah, because I'm perfectly frank, we're hearing a lot of evidence that says it's not class 1, 2, or 3 is rubbish. And that really can't be the case, or what might be. So what is the land used for at the moment?
Our land over is just being conceived with prevention plan subdivision of 12 lots. There is to be lot size, large 40 hectare protective block between the wastewater treatment plant and this peri-urban style management. It's called Okura, that's the name of the development, and it's used for that. It was used for dairy farming, which wrecked the soil. There's still we had a dairy farm with us. We can compare the landscape. We're still seeing the divots from that. The bottom part of it was originally as a we appreciated it as a Kerikeri. It was one of the large grapefruit orchards. Mr. Wilkinson built it 80s and 90s. And as a commercial grapefruit orchard, it had no benefit. And the soil type down that lower area is full of stones, bog, so it's hard to plough or anything like that.
So it's viable for dry stock. Yes, that's sort of like
light dry stock. That's what's been used for the great holding. It's got a portion of that at the moment, but it's easily damaged. That's just, our landscapers, we're trying to get rid of the animals and the damage. You see what we've done here. I'm trying to enhance it, and I think having an area of plan and overview of a development down there with that in mind, with the transport structure close to the town, with the potential for treatment of effluent on site. But we see that as a huge benefit for the landscape and for the community. At the moment we all have, in those little environments, we have a septic tank and an effluent field. And again, it's on clay soils. If you are able to collect the water or pre-treat that, what goes into the wastewater, you minimise the water going here. There's a whole lot of things that will benefit that landscape other than keeping small cattle on it.
okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
And so can I just add something just in that regard? The rural section 32, the proposed plan, done by Foresight Consulting, identifies the 242 to 538 hectares for viable sheep beef and grain market. So the largest landholding there, I think, is 40 hectares, and next largest is 11 and 6.
Have you got any evidence to us on what you think is it your evidence that there is a lack of rural residential zoning around Kerikeri? There needs to be more, or is it just that this site is more suited to that zoning?
My evidence argues this site's more suited.
We've got obviously Mr. McRae's assessment that said there's plenty of capacity in the existing zoning. Any evidence on that? Obviously, you're not an economist, so
I'm not a economist.
obviously we're going to be having some questions for Mr. McRae and other economists who are going to appear tomorrow and next week. Okay, I'll see if the other commissioners have got any questions for you.
I just had a question about the boundary, because you've suggested the forest. You see that as a natural boundary of sort, defensible boundary. Whereas you said the section 42A described it as a natural boundary of sorts. Sorry, just to clarify. I just wanted to hear more about that. So essentially, we were to look at rezoning to what you're asking for, choosing the Waitangi forest is the natural boundary.
Is it a defensible boundary? Yeah,
Yes.
correct. So there is to the north, it borders the landholding. To the east, there is a stretch of large reduction on land before it gets to the forest. So these will go to buck out the east. But that's not unusual. That's the case in there's other areas where there is a rural production, rural residential boundary, but ultimately it can't really go past the forest, so there's no risk of it just bleeding out in that direction.
No, that was my only question.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a couple of, firstly, I'll just declare that I've known Craig Lee and Tony Munro for a few decades, quite a few decades. They were my neighbours when I did a subdivision, which is Te Urutawa Drive. And Te Urutawa was named after the first child, the union between Maori and Pākehā in Kerikeri. Just a bit of useless information for you. But my questions were, well, more a commentary in some of it. The soils are poor. It's an old grey-wacky, Hokanui salt loam, poorly drained, very shallow topsoil, and they do plug badly. It's quite a compact clay that causes that problem. So it doesn't meet the highly productive land. Just cover that off. The questions I had, and you both spoke of it, but predominantly Mr. McPhee, you talked about compatibility of the surrounding land uses, close to town and schools, which I agree with. There's a lot of land uses. I know that area pretty well. But the question I had, underperformance of the wastewater upgrades and the limited progress on the consent renewals. Now, have you got more information on that? I've got some, but I'd like
I've written some of my evidence from the 3-year long-term plan annual report. So you're referring to section 36 of my rebuttal.
Yeah.
Sorry, paragraph 36. Yeah, so I've got all that information from council documents.
Okay. So my understanding is that resource consent for renewal on discharge is underway. I don't know how long that will take. Consenting processes could be a couple of years. So there is some limitation there. And we do have some evidence around the current capacity of the plant, which you know. But the concept of being able to have another block of land that's very close to existing infrastructure, so in particular, water's pretty easy to manage with tanks on site. But we've had exactly the same request. If you were here for the Kaitaia, the Ken Lewis Trust there. So, and as our chair, Mr. Scott, has indicated, you know, we're getting this from all over the show. So it's where do we stop and how do we manage it?
I think there's a problem. I've lived in Kerikeri since I was 15 at the high school. You know, being away, being around, and we would have come back here. Now, Kerikeri is a cool place to live. We love bringing kids up here. This is how we actually live. And we haven't lived so far in intensive multi-story buildings. people who come here, I've been selling section period for a number of years, people who come here tend to buy a house on an acre or 3/4 of an acre. They go and buy themselves a compulsory ride on mower and they go fishing. It's tiring, they enjoy that kind of living. That seems to be what the market, that's what we've been selling to. That's the people who we've become our neighbours. So I think the idea of saying that it's not, we don't want more of that, I'm not sure that that's right. I think I agree with the concept. You don't want to have pockets over here, pockets over there. That makes no sense to me at all. But I think what we're trying to do here is demonstrate how you have what's proposed is a rural residential style, or a rural, like a very urban residential style block, and over a stream 40 hectare zone. But just having that a large, having 3/4 acre sections for discretion down 2,000 square metres, and over the boundary of 40 hectares. But very hard to understand whether there could be a transition into something that could be more appropriate. And in fact, again, this is something that we've just been consented with and approved and titles to provide that is just that. So it's a 2 hectare style, lifestyle block experience, and people think to up there. And I think the idea, so I would question the abrupt change from the residential to a 40 hectare.
Just a comment, Chair. The point about the infrastructure, on the first day, we did note to our officers that we will be asking those questions to the infrastructure staff about not only about the treatment plants themselves, but further to that, the new council CCO across all of Northland, and the fact that we've agreed to a 10-year program of work between all three councils, not just our council, and the timeframes and how that actually works in with how we plan for growth. So I think that is a relevant point about not only the capacity of the Kerikeri treatment plant, but actually the capacity over the next 10 years and how we're working with other councils for their work programs as well.
Well, this is about how we're going to pay for that as a rate payer.
We have an agreement with all three councils that already have tables of the exact projects that we've agreed to, and that's in the contract. No other projects are in the contract, and that is for a 10-year period. So that's a long time.
So that's encouraging that that's been done. But as stated in my evidence, at the time of rezoning, there was insufficient evidence to support any further rezoning of urban land. So it's good to hear that the council is getting information about their assets and planning for growth. What I'm suggesting is this piece of land, and we don't know how long this will take. This piece of land is strategically placed with a bunch of things on it which can support housing in the interim while infrastructure is being addressed in the area.
Just one more question before we finish. Your evidence sort of relies a lot, I think, on the Waitangi forest as a defendable boundary. In terms of the question of defensible boundaries, you refer to the Waitangi forest as a defensible boundary. And we can't get the planning maps today, but I've got Google Maps open, so I can sort of see how that runs across the northern edge. Yep. I'm just wondering, what are your comments about defendable boundaries with regards to the eastern side of the property and the southern side?
Yep. So how is it addressed before there are two large landholdings on the eastern side of where it's supposed to be rezoned. That is rural production. It cannot go any further than that because it is the forest. So there isn't a risk of it going any further than those rural properties. There is no east side. Yes. There is no scope, I understand, to rezone those properties rural residential. And I did highlight in my rebuttal that there are other instances in the district where the rural production zone abuts the rural residential.
And to the south? To the south of the site? Are you relying on the riparian margin there, or in terms of your defensible boundary?
This is the road, the road that goes to the White Chapel, land.
Chapel
Hill, sorry, yeah, there's a road,
There's that road that sort of swings southeast. Around the bottom, is that the one you're talking to?
It's a gravel driveway that goes down to the Mara, which is and that's the eastern part of the rural production land, which is quite steep. It's very steep. It gets steeper as it goes further to the east.
The south is rural production. South is large, very large land.
Okay.
And they have most emissions that I can find already rezoned to.
And can you just help me, where is the wastewater treatment plant in relation to your property? Yeah, I can't turn it on, I can't get the planning maps going, so.
Have you got my primary evidence there?
Yes.
The wastewater treatment plant is at the end of Okura Trust's property. It has been subdivided into these the average size blocks and 4 hectare blocks.
Have you got a map for me in the
Yep, on page 16 of my primary evidence, there's a water services map. You will see a blue outline of the submitted land holdings, and you'll see the red dotted line there. That is the truck line that goes through the submitter's property.
Yep.
And to the east there is the location.
to the east? Where's that? East. Is it sort of off your plan to the east?
Pardon me?
Is it off your plan to the east? You've got us looking at figure 9.
Figure 9, yep. So the plant itself is, so on the northeastern, so you can see the trunk line, right?
Yes.
The red line. So you follow that going east. Yep, so the treatment plant is east of the east of the site.
Okay, so it goes a red dotted line off to the east, and it becomes a solid red line.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's where the discharge is.
So it's slightly east of that solid red line.
I beg your pardon, so you're asking me the wastewater treatment plant?
Correct.
Yes, and so in figure 9, the wastewater treatment plant is on the eastern side of the blue boundary. As the dotted line comes, red dotted line comes.
I found it on Google Maps.
Thank you.
It's right at the end of Okura Drive.
That's great.
Yeah, that was a good answer.
Yeah. So this is the Okura Drive that just recently built. This is the infrastructure that we're talking about. And yeah.
Okay, I get that. No, thank you. I understand where that is now. Okay, well, because we've got this flipped timetable, I'll give council officers a chance to respond. Ms. Pearson, would you like to make any comments while we have the speaker here? Well, obviously, you can make comments at the end of all the evidence, but there might be a question, clarification, or some comments you might want to make.
I think I'll probably do a combination of both. I think potentially first through the chair, just not necessarily a point of clarification for me, but maybe a point of clarification for the panel, given that we've got a submitter here and a further submitter, and their requests are not the same in terms of spatially what they're asking for. The Greygill Rain submission is for a much larger area of land, and the Okura Trust is primarily focusing on the land that has already been subdivided. So some of the messaging that's come through about, again, just zone is what we are, it's already fragmented. In my view, some of the already subdivided lots do meet that, but that isn't reflective of all of the land that's being asked to be rezoned. So there is an area on the edge, the closest area to the rural residential zone, that is starting to take on characteristics of that zone. That isn't reflective of all of the land being considered here. So I don't think I would agree with this being a zoning anomaly or, just a completely miszoning of the land. There is elements of the land that has been fragmented. There's the management plan subdivision part that's been followed. But that is something that has occurred under the operative district plan in multiple different parts of the Far North district. And to, I guess, match the zoning to where all of those subdivisions have occurred, you would end up with a lot of land being upzoned further and the potential extra yield coming on with that as well. I think we've covered it yesterday, but I think in terms of the assertion that I've relied primarily on the Kerikeri-Waipapa Spatial Plan as the rationale for recommending rejection of a lot of these rural residential things. We talked about the strategic direction that was already in the PDP for a compact urban zone yesterday, and obviously the spatial plan had added helpful context as to council's vision for where that growth would go, but it isn't the only or primary reason for taking the strategic approach. I know we're going to hear a lot more about that next week, but focusing on that compact urban form is something that is coming from the PDP's strategic direction. In terms of the wastewater servicing, obviously rural residential, which is the zone that's being asked for, isn't a zone that requires wastewater servicing at this point. And I guess the question in my mind was that if this is being pushed as a location that has got quite a few infrastructure services that are starting to be more urban in nature, whether rural residential is actually the right zone for that. And we've obviously canvassed that a wee bit with the previous submitter about efficiency and use of land and efficient use of those services. It may be that at a future time, parts of this land, you may look at them for a different purpose, but whether or not rural residential actually gives you your efficient use of those services, given that they don't need those pipes now, is I guess a question that the panel will need to be wrestling with. That is probably all of the comments I had at this point, unless the panel had any specific questions for me based on what we've heard.
Well, what would your view be if the submitter came along and batted for a residential zoning, for a general residential zoning?
That is also problematic, given that we have rural residential. There is already a rural residential buffer on that edge. So if it was going to be something that was looked at for general residential, it would have to be part of a wider look at upzoning of all of that land on that eastern side of Kerikeri. It's not something where you'd want to leapfrog.
Right, okay, well, thank you very much for those comments. Thank you very much for your evidence and your attendance today and answers to our questions.
Thank you all for allowing us to be here.
Yeah, good, great, thanks. Interesting discussion.
Yes. I just want to take it up. Okay.
Oh, I see. Honestly, I thought this one was. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I think we're up to now the McCorn Road landowners. And that's Mr. Sanson, you're representing them. Please, you can all come up and have a seat here.
You're up there as well.
We'll intercept. Oh, it's afternoon. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to this hearing. Thank you for, we've had a wee bit of a chop and change with the timetable, so thank you for being flexible with that. We've got some evidence from you, haven't we, Mr. Anderson?
Yes, good.
And are you going to provide a summary?
Yes, yep.
We'll hand it over to you. Are you going to be calling any further evidence or?
We've got some landowners here and they'd like to talk to their submission.
Sure.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So would you rather do your summary and then call them as witnesses?
Correct. Okay. Yes, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm just here to represent Macquarie Road landowners. Sort of characterises a pretty discreet rezoning submission. And take my sort of rebuttal evidence as read and provide a summary. So my key evidence of this is the application of the criteria that's been used to, I don't want to say dismiss the submission, because that's a pretty strong term, but to provide some robustness around the zoning proposition. And I guess might just take you through the process I went through and trying to understand where the council report writers are coming from and where a submitter might come from and another planning's view might come from, and considering this horticultural precinct and rural production type of dual approach. And in the rebuttal evidence, I point to sort of two interface areas where along Hero Road, one's along Kerikeri Road. Figures 1 and 2 where I guess I couldn't follow why criteria, some of the criteria are applicable to the Macquarie Road submitters, but not potentially applicable to these other interface areas. And that includes things like discussions around defensible boundaries. And I'm sorry if I'm covering stuff from yesterday. I haven't had a chance to.
That's fine. It's all. I mean, we've heard a lot of this type of evidence, but obviously it's all specific to your site, so we're happy to hear it.
Sure. So things around defensible boundaries, things around cadastral boundaries as a second order criteria, things about existing uses. And so when I look at those interface scenarios, for example, I couldn't follow why they would be given that preference or not be or are included over the other. And so that sort of gives rise to the consistent applicability of that specific criteria. But I guess in turn, just maybe going a step back, is that I agree that with the reports and supporting reports that this Macquarie Road area is fragmented and it's probably very unlikely to be reverted back to horticultural use. And that the soil, as is provided in my rebuttal evidence, has always been sort of considered as possibly excluded if you were to look at figure 7. So the soils are not within class 1 to 3. Uses are residential in nature, and the areas fragmented down to quite smallish parcels. And the approach of this dual precinct and rural production zone in this case is to provide, is for these sites, the submitter sites, to act as a buffer for the other horticultural landholders and land in the surrounds. And I believe that's quite a blunt tool when you're looking at the specifics of the site. When you look at some of the tools suggested by the council in terms of using a 20-metre buffer setback for sensitive activities, for example. If you were to apply that, which I've roughly done in figure 6, there are some sites which do interact or use of a little better word, touch some of these legitimate orcharding operations in the surrounds, but for all intents and purposes
can largely be separated from those specific uses. And I guess another thing I saw when considering the whole package was that, you know, it could also be subdivision that could be a trigger point for considering sensitive activities as well. So I'm not, whilst in this case, I don't think the Hawke precinct and rural production zones is relevant. I think there's a better tool to manage that reverse sensitivity or interface issue that doesn't rely on just the, well, you're in a buffer, deal with it, and you've got no, what I call reasonable use of land, or even further, we're starting to talk about some sort of dishonest zoning around what's actually on the land, and we're protecting other uses without, yeah, it's all stick. If I can use that, there's not a lot of permitted use under that Hawke precinct zone. So that's how I've approached it. I have in my meta question, I have included other land holdings, so this doesn't stick out sore thumb, and there might be questions around scope, but I sort of argue in that case that, you know, as we responded to minute 14, and then we received sort of these further criteria, it's incumbent on us to provide you with best information to respond in a logical manner. And so I have included additional sites. There may be a critique on that, but I believe that's in the best interest in providing you know, a full package that responds to these criteria. I think to escape that would you know, it would be quite prejudicial because the criteria weren't provided at the start of the process, for example. And if we had known that, you know, we could have considered this more broadly or strategically with other parties along the corner road. And the landowners here will be able to talk to things a bit more thoroughly around existing uses, but as part of Appendix B, I drove around the general area and started to, I guess, plot out what the actual uses were. And whilst there's some horticultural precinct, obviously it ties it down to that particular rural production use, but that wasn't a major use within the general area. And so to have a buffer for in this instance seemed a bit over the top. Yeah, when in fact it's more of a potted plant nursery landscaping type of nurseries. There are orchards. You're looking at Appendix B buffer more to the east, smaller discrete orchards around, but in the whole, yeah, McCorn Road sort of separates those uses. McCorn Road would be a higher tier defensible boundary according to the criteria. And in this case would be a mix of McCorn Road and some conditional boundary. And so based on all those factors, well, those first couple of criteria, and probably the same around there was consideration of the rural capacity and growth demand, and obviously there's this thought that you know, we've got rural residential too much. You know, we need less of that. I'm not here to argue with those figures provided. Perhaps similar to some of the late evidence of the previous submitters was that you heard that thought around people have been coming to Kerikeri for there was a rural residential product that some prefer over this type of compact urban form. And whether that's a strategic direction or not, that's what people have been coming to. And some people go to urban, so it's not an either or, it's an and type of discussion that we're trying to provide. That's probably my summary for now, and I'll let the landowners here introduce themselves, and then if they've got anything to say, they can say that, and we're happy to answer any questions. So thank you.
Yep, okay, thank you. Who'd like to go first?
Yeah, it would be useful if you're able just to describe, you know, on some of the submitters' properties, just what there is at the moment, what's actually happening on the sites at the present time. We've not done a site visit to this area at this stage. It'd be useful to get a description of what's there at the present time.
Do you want to start? Just describe your own property.
Okay, yeah.
Good
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Chair and Committee. My name is Timothy Sept, and I'm one of the landowners along the Court Road. Go and have a closer look. The property is 49E. So something that the previous submitter gave general reference to, something that Steve has highlighted is this strategic direction of rural residential. And the intention for me to purchase the land back in 1999 was that something that certain people in our communities crave for is a lifestyle that encompasses a bit of proximity to a good urban area, service area mostly. There were several other factors that came into my decision to purchase there, and the fact that we could retain a more comfortable, in our view, rural style of living. That's because I grew up on a farm in the Bay of Plenty. So there was a lot of similarity in this district with the situation in Bay of Plenty. That was Te Puke area. So the similarity between Te Puke and the change of land use from dairy to horticulture occurred in my early years. And that's what I saw developing here. So I'd just like to say one thing. I definitely do not want to challenge the horticultural zones and areas, since they've been a huge benefit to the far north, or particularly Kerikeri area. However, I do take up on Steve's wording. There is a strategic trajectory, you may say, for people that want to follow a similar pathway. So I believe what the challenge for the council is, for which we are ratepayers, but I hate to emphasise that, is to find a way to harness that potential and to make sure. And so that's obviously going to be the tools and planning needed has to be quite refined. And that, I think, would encompass what I want to say.
Well, Rob didn't, sorry, he didn't really want to talk, but if you just describe your site, Rob, you know better than anyone else for the benefit of the panel. They're just quite interested in what's there and what's around it.
I'm Rob Bellnouse and I like Pine Woodlaw. I've had the property for about 25 years and it was a lovely place to live. I've got 5 acres there, 57 McCorn Road, at the border of the river, and it's everything what a person wants to live. I love there. But all I'm doing is make 5 acres of walks and just looking at sensible leaves, no good gardening, and a run off the water. We're a great protection for the horticultural rural living. We have a good buffer zone from there to the river, and it protects the river because we look after it. Councils can look after it, we'll do everything else. But if we could subdivide it into acre blocks or 4 hectares, would be both beneficial for the whole district, and council has control of pollution of the river because of the sewerage systems. And basically, I've sat down and looked at it. Well, this is nice. And I looked up and down the road, and when the submissions came through that we wanted to do horticultural, which it isn't horticultural land at all. Why should we be wearing that title? And why shouldn't it be acre block that will come nicely to protect the river, we protect it,
And everyone, you know, they can do it quietly, work away. Every bit of land would be self-sufficient because it would be large enough loss. So that's me. And,
Thank you.
okay.
When I was in Lorraine, it's very right long. I'm an Auckland, road, but we've just moved up here, so, my late father was in Norway for many years. Yeah, I just can't understand why it's obviously in the land, obviously can't be used for the land, been used such a long time. Not hang on with that land. It's never going to revert that. Also, then I'm not sure, I just can't understand your buffer zones for orchard, or poultry use. Surely in this day and age, people with babies and sprays or whatever should contain what they use and it should be safe. People around them should be responsible for sprays or whatever that they use in agriculture. I'm not going to change that. So that's my opinion. And just the fact that if you draw a line from the Waipapa roundabout to actually our residents, it's probably, I don't know the exact distance, less than a kilometre. So
It's 700 metres.
yeah. So if you're looking at, I mean, I know we're not Auckland, but if you're looking at the changes in Auckland now, they are drawing circumference around populated areas where putting in more intense housing up 8 stories. So, I mean, we're certainly not there, but we're certainly within the range of quite big development. So it just doesn't seem logical that the integrity of our land remains as it is. Thank you, everyone.
No, thank you very much. It's all valuable evidence to receive. So. There's also a couple of Aucklanders sitting on this panel. And I'm contemplating it.
I guess I'd like to make a comment, Jim. Waipapa is becoming a major satellite for Kerikeri, and it's developing under our nose as quick as it is. I mean, watch it every day. New stuff, new buildings going up. It's all happening. And I think Waipapa is going to become quite a major centre for supply and delivery of services in the area. And people in Kerikeri are actually relocating to Waipapa, so they've got some sort of incentive there. The big thing that I see with the property, because we're a neighbour to Rob, so we're 63, he's 57, and we just move along. Our property goes right down to the river, so we enjoy the river. We provide a natural boundary to the river, so there's absolutely, all our properties do provide the boundary that stops pollution, and that's really important from our point of view. The Corn Road is just a natural boundary. It's just sitting there as a road, 20 metres wide, runs all the way down, and it can provide that definition between rural and hustler. And it's like a no-brainer. It's just like, let go the old rural concept and just let us be part of the normal process that we would expect to have in that location. Yeah, that's it for me, really.
Thank you.
Since we've been there, my garden safari is very good, and these properties have been on 3 times, so that reflects the tenancy around the property and way we're keeping the land area and everything right down to the river.
between Don and I, there's a pathway that runs down to the water. We maintain that path. I've got seeds down there, the big swamp down there, and every now and again I go down there and have to give them a stir up because the language is a bit wild and also to keep the rubbish up there clean. So we're on top of that, and the place is a picture, and you're all welcome to come down, have a look at it, and you'll know exactly what it's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Yeah, well, firstly, I mean, we probably will swing by your property sometime this week. Yeah, so if you see a couple of shifty characters in a large four-wheel drive, it'll be us. But thank you for the offer of the cup of tea. We might be constrained at the time, but who knows? But yeah, we would like to come, let's drive down and see the context.
Yes, you're welcome.
I'm just going to offer one little bit of info you probably might not realise. McCorn Road actually finishes at our letterbox, and 5 of us share in the rest of the roadway to the very end. So that's not councils and anything else, and that's all part of that petition.
How much horticultural activity is actually taking place on those properties at the present time?
Yeah.
25 years.
Because the aerial shows some shelter belts, at least on one of the properties.
Well, between us and Rob's place, we've got all planted beautiful Peruri trees and whatever all through there. So and that's used right beside it as the walkway for public access down the river. And of course, along the river's edge, when we first came to the property, we spent a huge amount of time and effort and money to remove gorse, blackberry, honeysuckle and whatever else from there. And now it's all planted in natives and it's all done, looks magic.
So where's the closest horticultural activity?
Across the other side of the road is our orchard man.
It's the other side of State Highway 1.
Kapiro. He's here between Kapiro Road and McCorn. He sits in there with his property, and all he's got is a great big little area where he sits trees and shrubs on a plastic, basically a great plastic mat, and he supplies that to Plant Zone, which is his big main outlet for selling, and of course the whole of New Zealand. He sends stuff all over the place. It's just a big area.
So that Windrow, you look, when the properties are divided up, they have a 10 metre and a 10 metre between the properties, and it was all planted with trees down there, which will just keep them mowed and everything else. So between me and these two, we've got 10 metres, and between there's another 10 metres, and on another road going down there is another zone that we have natural just things on the property.
Also, just on the northern side of McCorn Road between us and the neighbour, it's all planted up in natives. It's all trees and all the way along the road. So it's further part of that separation.
If I may again, just hopefully this is information. As Rob was saying, the properties were purchased through a subdivision called Totra Estate. That's how it was sold to me, and those green zones between each properties are written into the titles as commoners. So they are there, I understand, in perpetuity. The same as my piece of block of land, 49E. If you look closely at it, I have access to similar conditional information as you through my job. There is a dot boundary between my boundaries and the actual natural pathway of the Waipapa Stream. And again, my understanding, dock land strip remains in perpetuity as it's Crown land. So they cannot, they can never be subdivided unless there was an act of parliament that changed that. The other thing that Robert highlighted was the mowing of grass. And I didn't want to do that. So I changed in a very small scale of typical hobby farmers, as people call us, and did some initial plantings in olives. Olives work well up here, we've discovered. But the soil type changes, and this is the thing that's been brought out in everything that I've seen in Steve's submission in an excellent book that's published. This is a scientific work on, it's called From the Seed to the Fire, by Auckland, somebody at Auckland University, on the highly variable soil types in the far north. So on our 1 hectare block of land, olives go fine. We've done a really small scale experiment with peanuts. They kind of work, but they don't. You can't grow avocados on it. They just die. And so you end up with these little patches of land where this works and that works and that works. So for somebody to take that land back over and convert it into horticultural work or use would be quite challenging, I should imagine.
I think Mr. Sanson's finding typically of planning consultants, they bring their clients along to hearings and the clients don't want to say anything and then they can't keep them quiet.
I didn't say it. No.
Has anybody looked at, potential subdivision plan for the area at all? What might be achieved under the rural lifestyle zoning? Or is it just an application of the dimensions of?
I haven't done a yields type of assessment. Most are in the hectare range. Rob here has lodged the 4 lot, so acre sections. 4 acres, 4 1 acre sections.
Is that an application that is lodged at the moment?
Correct. They're all around that size, so if you've got an acre, you might be able to get 2 or 1 additional site from each. But some are constrained in terms of some of their size and some share right of ways and the like. So I don't have a total number. I might be, if there's other questions, I can do a quick total area versus the.
Yeah, I don't think so. But do any of the properties incur any effects from horticultural activity in the wider area at all? Spray drift or that nature?
Oh, no, I mean, he doesn't spray now. He changed the use of his land, don't he? He just plants that, would be sold around New Zealand. Yeah, he's rung up and told us, he's spraying. That's when he had some stuff in the groove, but he gave up on that because it probably didn't work.
And when you visit the sites, it might be useful to visit the aerial show as what you think as a nursery, orchard. Is covered in a black mat, is that right?
Yeah, he's leveled it all off so that he can store all these plants, and they put on top of the surface of the dirt a mat. It keeps the weeds, no weeds, so the plants just sit there and haven't got a weed problem. And he's got acres of he's got thousands and thousands of trees, which, as I said, he sells all over New Zealand.
So approximately the lot size, the existing, how big are your properties on average?
2 hectares, I suppose.
A little over a hectare, right?
Yeah.
I can list.
Oh, but it's approximately like 1 hectare, maybe a little more, maybe
About 1 1/4 hectares.
So
But-
it's 1.8 is the biggest.
Yeah.
And they go down to 1.0.
And you're thinking of rural residential zone? Yes. Have you considered the rural lifestyle zone, given the lot sizes that you've currently got? Well, okay, well, I'll do Mr. Sense's job for you for a minute. The rural residential zone allows sites down to 4,000 square metres.
As a control activity,
2,000 is the absolute. So, I mean, what I've been saying during these hearings is the rural residential zone is probably the smallest lot size you can achieve without being ridiculous.
Yeah.
Then you've got rural settlement zone, but that's not really Kerikeri, it's not a settlement, it's a town zone. That doesn't really apply. So the other relevant rural zone would be the rural lifestyle zone. And that's your bigger lot, the 1 hectare plus. And it seems to me, I don't know, are you wanting a zone where you can further subdivide them? Or are you wanting a zone that reflects the existing pattern?
I think, I suspect, I mean, we are, same as Rob, we would like an opportunity in the future to subdivide, we could, into 2 halves. So, you know, 7 acres, 1.5 each or something. And so are you saying the residential one is more suited to that?
Well, the residential one's the one you've sought. And I'm asking, have you considered the rural lifestyle zone, which has a larger lot size, but it seems more consistent with what you've got?
So, again, Mr. Chair, that hasn't been a consideration because the control activity size is larger than the sites at present. So it would be redundant to seek that when the control activity for lifestyle is 4 hectares and discretion is 2 hectares. So these sites are all under that level. So the natural selection was to go to rural residential. And from that, we've provided facts about the characteristics about the site to support.
Okay, but just playing devil's advocate for a moment. I mean, if you were to choose a zone that reflected the land pattern at the moment, probably closer to rural lifestyle residential, as you can see.
Well, it's sort of neither. It's sort
It seems to me that those
12, you know, it's rural lifestyles to me, yeah. Minimum, and if these are under that, mostly 1, it's sort of in between, you know, it's a different fit, and so I think it's a useful.
So you're a round up rather than round down.
Yeah.
Swedish rounding. Okay. Yeah, I'll give you good answers. A chance in the middle. Okay, and the other thing is in terms of where you want this, essentially you want the zone to move from the stream up to the road.
Yeah, to the full road. Yes,
Yeah, and that's for you, in your opinion, that's the defendable boundary, natural boundary. The council officers have said the stream is the most appropriate, and that obviously that's where we might.
Like a lovely little stream on one side, boundary on the other.
Okay. I've got a planning question. This question of capacity comes up again, and I think you've sort of said you're not necessarily going to challenge that evidence, but you did sort of make a statement in your evidence in paragraph 58, where you said, I believe the economic report's reliance on plan enablement capacity is an issue. This is a theoretical number. In practice, many of these lots would be developed for reasons. And I think I understand what you're saying, but having said that, plan enabled capacity is a thing, it's defined in the MPSUD, isn't it? And it has, you know, that definition has some criteria around it for a short-term need. So, council's obviously obliged to have regard to plan enabled capacity. It's a thing the economists rely on. What other reason do you have for us to set that aside?
I think it's a discrete areas there, so we're not talking about in the hundreds. I think we're talking about a marginal, and if I may provide the exact number for the equation post this meeting, but I don't think we're talking about a lot of potential sites or extra residences that would skew out the margins or skew the data to that level, I guess we're saying it's and, like, you know, we can say, well, some may never be developed over here, but because we're such a discrete zone, it's, I think the effects of that are going to be quite small, as opposed to say if we're talking about thousands of houses or even hundreds.
Up and over, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a discrete area.
I suppose one of the things that we have to weigh up is whether we agree that it should be part of the horticulture precinct or not, but there's also is whether we agree that it should be a rural residential zone, which will allow a controlled pathway to build the subdivision. So that's giving you the context of, I think that's what we're weighing up. Would you agree?
Yeah, but you'd be lucky probably to get six extra properties up here.
Yeah, okay.
It's not going to be a breakout 100, anything like that.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I understand that. Look, I think I've done enough talking. I think I'll ask the other panelists if they have any questions.
I think that you covered quite a lot. I do want to ask what dishonest zoning mean, but I think that we've talked about the basis for.
Yeah, it's more, I think Judge Kirkpatrick brings that up more in some of his thinking, but yeah, it's just not a triangle, you know, it's on the ground.
Just it hasn't been the alcohol in the room. I've known Bob for a long time. I've been on his property. The place is beautiful. Been here that long that before this was subdivided to this extent, I actually raised cattle on it, and it was covered in gorse and other rubbish. But so I know the land well. The soils are difficult and they are highly variable. So I'll relay all that to my fellow commissioners. And I'm just very concerned that our chair, Scott, if he's looking to relocate, he doesn't understand the visa requirements.
Sure, I can perhaps send them the old linkage somewhere. I better get my green card application. Thank you very much. I think I think Ms. Pearson does want to clarify some matters. So.
I thank you, Mr. Chair. I think potentially just for context, particularly as I understand the submitters, we didn't manage to have a pre-hearing meeting with these submitters, and there wasn't evidence pre-circulated in June. So the rebuttal evidence that came in 2 weeks ago was the first sort of presentation of arguments on this one. I'm also aware that the owners weren't involved in hearing 9, so there wasn't any sort of, they weren't able to hear the discussion on rural residential versus rural lifestyle, and may not be aware that my recommendation for rural lifestyle is to drop that minimum lot size to 2 hectares as a controlled activity, 1 hectare as a discretionary. So that would better match what is there right now. I would, just for my understanding, or actually maybe the better starting point is in terms of the scope of, and I know Mr. Sanson has signalled that there may be potential scope issues in terms of creating that cohesiveness of rezoning as a block. Appreciate that the minute 14 criteria were not available back in 2022 when the plan was originally notified. I would struggle to find the scope to rezone all of the other properties that were included in the original package of zone blocks. I also would potentially appreciate some clarification just talking about defensible zone boundaries. Understand the shift from stream to road as the boundary moves north. Also understand you've got the western boundary sort of set with the state highway. Would just like some clarification about the eastern side and where that looks like from the defensible boundary, or would that be cadastral?
It'd be the other road, wouldn't it, goes down that side.
Right of way comes
It looks like there's a right of way that hooks around.
Yeah.
The one we're talking about.
Is that?
I don't think it's got a name. It's just a driveway.
Yeah, with roads coming off it and that creating another boundary on the eastern side.
And then you've got genuine horticulture east of that.
North.
Oh, he's got the whole, yeah.
So can I comment on the scope question again? Just, I just don't see how it's feasible for us to be responding to criteria. And in order to best respond to that, we're providing solutions and options for your consideration, and I don't see how that's not in scope. If not, those criteria should have been provided at the start of the process, so we could have determined them in a far broader and strategic sense. That's just my opinion, because otherwise the goalposts are shifting as we've been coming along, and so that's my response, is that we do have scope to include that to better respond to the criteria, or else we should have known that up front.
Well, minute 14 has been around for some time.
But that's so the criteria are an aside to that, right?
Well, the criteria are in the minute.
No, the criteria are from the staff who are building upon your minute. So that's my approach to say, well, in order to better respond to this criteria, which are bringing in different and more subtle things to your minute, that's just how we're responding.
I think, Mr. Chair, there's also sort of a step in what I was commenting on with regards to scope is right back at the point of the original submission being made at the point of notification, where there was no minute 14, there was no further rural rezoning criteria, and the properties that were identified in that original submission are not the full package of properties that are being put forward at this point in time.
And I think all those changes that have been made or the like, they're already initiatives that we've shared with submitters, the officers ourselves, in terms of trying to advance the whole process. So it's a progressive thing, you can't.
But the same response, sir, is in order to respond and give you a better, in that case, then we would have to provide, strictly speaking, both sides, which would then be, I guess wouldn't have the benefit of knowing what that criteria was, and would be potentially unfavoured because we'd have this mixed match of zoning. And
so we had the opportunity to provide evidence in advance, and we haven't taken that. So maybe you would have found that out, if we engaged council officers earlier too.
Yeah, but sir, that's one side, I guess, or one approach to say, well, if you opt in, that's better. But that doesn't say that in the Schedule 1 process, right? So that's putting a lot of people in saying opt into Schedule 1, and it's actually saying, well, is that going to be more favourable? Is that what you're saying back? Like that's
well, it was a process that enabled both sides to explore the Section 32 elements of your request. It sort of provided, we thought, that provides submitters, quite a lot of scope to explore the Section 32 arguments, be able to make them engage with council officers, have a backwards and forth, exchange evidence and rebuttal, as opposed to just waiting for 2 weeks before a hearing and just exchanging evidence. I mean, vast feedback we've had is that people have enjoyed the process and appreciated the opportunity.
Look, so no issues about enjoyment or what could have been done, but if we're bringing in additional criteria that wasn't known at the start, I just think we have the ability to respond to that fully through the changes we've made. I think that's nothing but fair, because the converse of that is how I've characterised it, is shifting of goalposts. How did council rezone the land to start with? Did they know this criteria, for example? That's just the question I'm asking.
I won't take it any further. Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for showing up. We think it's really good when the submitters turn up and present their case to us too and give us their experiences. So appreciate you being here and the evidence that you've given. I'm just wondering if you could just write your names down on a piece of paper and give it to us, or give it to I'd like, our recommendation report to acknowledge specifically who turned up, and I was nowhere near fast enough.
We know that you had nice gardens.
So if you could just get those names to Otherwise, thank you very much.
You do want to write it.
We at lunchtime now, okay?
We are, and if we could come back in half an hour, is that okay? Yep. Okay, I'm stopping recording now. Stopping recording. Yep.